Hello and welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be leveling up my pedalboard. So I've been operating off this version of my pedalboard for a few years now, and it originally started as a board to house and power all of my pedals that I had at the time, just for recording and jamming at home really. For the past couple of years I've started a band, we rehearse quite a lot now, we've started gigging recently, and it's just become apparent that this board just really isn't fit for purpose. It's not that it's just not big enough anymore, it's also not deep enough. I've had to retrofit some rubber pads at the bottom so it can fit the power supply underneath. But also with space at a premium, I've had to make compromises with cabling, and also it's just a bit awkward trying to switch between these pedals and tap dance in a live environment. So today I'm going to be doing a whole new pedalboard build, and hopefully you'll find this useful if you're looking to make some pedalboard upgrades or build one from scratch yourself. Essentially, we're going to be going through a build which is more fit for purpose for a gigging musician. And we're not actually going to start with thinking about what the new board is. We're actually going to map out the pedals, the power and the functionality, and then we're going to move on to the actual board that I decided to upgrade to. So I'm not actually going to spend too long here talking about the pedals specifically. This is more about what I'm having to consider with regards to what I use on the new board. So as you can see here, what we've currently got on the Pedaltrain is the tuner, drive section of pedals, modulation pedals, and a reverb and a delay. What I want to use moving forward is a 4-cable method, where the reverb and delays go through the effects loop in my Victory, and everything else goes into the front of the amp. So as you can see, I've been operating with 7 or 8 pedals with the current iteration of this board. And the power supply that I've been using, the Fuel Tank Chameleon, only has 6 isolated outputs. So I've actually been daisy chaining certain pedals together. Now, whilst the power supply can cope with that in terms of the current draw, most of the pedals I use are analog pedals with a low draw. It's never advised that you daisy chain pedals together. You have a greater chance of just bringing in unwanted noise into your rig. So I actually ended up selecting the Voodoo Labs Pedal Power 3 Plus. So there's actually 10 isolated 9-volt outputs at 500 milliamps. There's 2 switchable outputs at 200 and 500 milliamps a piece, 12 volts, 9 volts. And then there's 2 outputs at 12 volts, 1 amps output at the end. So in short, there's every isolated power option that I could ever need. And there's another reason I kind of ended up with this as well, which I'll come on to later when we actually migrate to the board itself. Now there's another functional addition to the new board build that I've been considering for some time, and it's related to the number of pedals I'm using and practical challenges I've had when playing live recently. And it just became apparent that a pedal switcher would be something that, practically speaking, for performance purposes and just for my own sanity, could really solve a lot of issues. So this is where the Boss ES8 comes in. So again, there are increasingly new options of pedal switchers on the market, and I looked into a number of them, and I just ended up on the Boss because I love Boss. I think they're bulletproof and reliable. It has infinitely more options than I perhaps would ever need. And it was pretty cost effective for what you get. And it's not just switching either, it's also signal quality. With this many pedals, if you've constantly got your signal going through all of them, there's a high chance that that signal chain is going to suffer from some loss. The benefits to a loop switcher is that you're only ever really using the loops that you're engaging at any one time. so the quality of your signal is arguably going to be better. So stage 1, it was figure out what pedals I wanted. Stage 2 was figure out the power that I needed. Stage 3 was think about the switcher that I wanted. And then I could start thinking about the board that was going to be able to house everything that I needed. Now what I've tried to do here is map out the configuration of the pedals as I would like them on the new board. And what I ideally want to do with the board selection is pick a board that's obviously big enough to house all of these pedals and the switcher and the power supply underneath, but I don't want it to be too big. I don't want to be carrying around any unnecessary, unwanted space and weight that I don't need to. I actually like the fact that with my current gigging rig, I can carry everything in one go, so I can have my guitar strapped to my back, I can have the pedal board in one hand, I can have my lunchbox head in the other. So with this, I want the smallest a board as possible that can house everything. And actually, all of the pedals you see here, it doesn't have to go in this order. With the switcher, it means that I can actually have these pedals in theory placed anywhere on the board. I really only just need to access the switcher at the front and the wah to the right. So what I selected in the end was the Pedaltrain Novo 24. This is actually the same width as my previous board. And again, through calculating the pedals that I wanted on the board, I know that this is wide enough, but importantly deep enough. The Novo series is Pedaltrain's version of boards that actually have deeper rails, so that I can actually fit more out the back of the board. It's slanted as well, so it's slightly easier to access those pedals at the back if I need to. But the most important thing with this is that I can quite comfortably fit a power supply underneath this if I want to, or if I want to put something like a patch bay in there at some point. Now there are a ton of different pedal board options out there, but the reason I've landed on Pedaltrain again is because I've used them for a few years and they've always been reliable, never let me down, and actually quite affordable for what you get. And yes, other pedal boards have quite innovative cable management systems underneath and inbuilt patch bays and power supplies, but actually I don't need anything too overtly complicated. I'm not an international touring musician, so I don't need something like a hard case. This actually comes with a soft case all in for 155 quid, which in my opinion is great value. And unlike some pedal board options, it actually comes with the pedal board tape, so you don't have to worry about buying that separately. So the next step is the build itself, so cue the music. So it's the next day. It's taken me the best part of 5 hours to put this board together. It's quite a long process. You can easily underestimate just what goes into pulling this thing together. Everything from powering pedals, patching them into the switcher, then just learning how the ES8 works itself. It takes time. But I have to say I'm really pleased with how it's come together, and I can already tell how much of a game changer this is going to be for me, both live but also in the studio when it comes to recalling different presets and just quickly having those different tones at my disposal. I'm going to go down to the board now and show you what I've set up, particularly when it comes to the patches that I've built in the ES8, and whilst it's not set in stone, it may evolve over time. This is currently what I've built with my current live set in mind. So here we are, here's the final built Starship Enterprise of Tone. It's currently set up in the 4-cable method, so we've got the guitar going into the input of the wah, which then goes straight into the input of the ES8. There's a send signal that goes straight to the tuner, but everything else is in its own individual loop. So if I switch to manual mode, I can select any of these pedals individually, on and off. But if I go back to memory mode, this is where I've started to build some presets. So I can flip through using the ES8 different combinations of these pedals and have different presets. So this one's labeled rhythm, 2 is labeled as solo, 3 is clean, clean chorus, fuzz, you get the idea. There are a number of different presets patched into the ESA already. Now there were some challenges in pulling this together and certain things that I want to flag now if you're thinking about building a pedal in this way. First and foremost is the cabling. So I'm used to using these quite heavy duty Ernie Ball patch cables, and as you can see, the jacks themselves are thick and chunky and great when it comes to relying on them not letting you down. Not so great when the inputs and outputs of the ESA are really close together. I've had to use some Boss pedalboard patch cables on this top row. These are patch cables that I had to build myself using the kit that they provided. And whilst it wasn't too complicated to put them together because they're solderless cables, I wouldn't say I'm 100% confident in them not failing. The wire itself is quite thin and the actual jacks themselves just don't fill me with a lot of confidence. A couple of the cables that I initially built actually failed, so I had to take them apart and rebuild them again, but it was the only way I could get the jacks to fit out the back end of the ESA. And then we come to the ESA itself. It does take some time to figure out the interface and how it works. Building the patches and reordering the pedals, putting in the effects loop for the 4-cable method, that all took a couple of hours in and of itself. So if you're thinking about incorporating this kind of switching system, just be prepared for that. So there we have it. There's the final pedalboard upgrades, and I for one am really delighted with how things have come together. It wasn't without energy and effort. It took hours to pull together and some injuries along the way. But I can already tell how much of a game changer this is going to be both live and in the studio, and I've finally got a board that's fit for purpose for a gigging musician. But I can't emphasize enough how important planning was to this process. Not just planning the layout of the pedals on the board, but planning out which pedals I wanted in which loops, how many loops I needed, what were those different patches going to look like, how many patch cables did I need, were those patch cables going to reach, what were the dimensions of the board factoring in the new switching system. There's so many questions involved, but if you figure out as much as you can prior to building, it means less trial and error along the way. I also tried to factor in little things where I could, like the fact Pedaltrain supply mounting kits for Voodoo Labs power supplies. So it required a bit of drilling, but mine's really securely fastened underneath. So hopefully you found this useful if you're looking to make upgrades similar to this or build a similar kind of board. If you've got any questions or you'd like me to do a bit of a deep dive in anything that you've seen today, put it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and until next time, I'll catch you later.